Welcome to Creative Leadership with Heart, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of creative leadership. I'm your host, Rico Nasol. Join me as we explore the transformative impact of heart-centered leadership in today's creative and design organizations. Hey, y'all. Welcome. Today we have Steven Gianakouros. He's the VP of Design at Magic. It's a Web3 company that helps create Web3 wallets with Web2 logins, if I got that right. Is that right?
Yeah, close enough. I think we're a Web3 software startup specializing in developing tech to help developers, companies, and large brands kind of create powerful experiences on this new blockchain technology.
Yeah, crypto is in blockchain. I don't know a lot about, but let's tell everybody else a little bit about you and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. Where do you want to
Yeah,
start?
where'd you go to school and like,
Cool.
yeah, what brought you into design and
So,
creative?
I probably had no choice. Like earlier on, like when I grew up, I was working. Yeah, I was always working since a kid. No, I grew up like heavily involved in art, and I think my parents kind of helped foster that painting, drawing, all of that stuff, making things. I had some cousins that bought me a computer back in the day. This is in the 90s, like probably, I'm gonna date myself, maybe 80s, 90s, something like that, and just found that kind of groove and that like intersection of art and design. I kind of still give my parents shit because I had a modem on this like IBM PC Junior. And if like I tried plugging it in, we got a huge phone bill and they yelled at me. Like I could have been, Zuck back then if they let me just go online. But no, it found this like beautiful intersection between art and design. Just I would go to school early and play with the computers and draw constantly. And that's why I kind of had like no choice in terms of like, oh, and plus I didn't want to work at a deli, my whole life. Not to knock delis, because actually I'd probably go back now and work at a deli. I love that shit. Um, but yeah, went to school for design and graphic design. Was really lucky to be at the start of kind of like the web era, web design. Started in print, doing DVDs and working on DVD covers and DVD screens, and then had an opportunity to work on web design, which led me to kind of working at, as a consultant in agencies for, small to mid-sized companies. Did that for probably half of my career, like a little over 10 years. And um, working at agencies, I worked with these brands, and it was fun kind of getting into the business side of things and learning about like these big companies and helping them kind of execute their, whether it's campaign or like experiences, and had an opportunity to go out to the Bay Area to go client side, we used to call it, right? Working at mint.com. And Mint was fantastic, great team, California, sunshine. Uh, Intuit was a big company that bought them out, and we had big resources, and it was fun working on the brand side, like and also with a mission to really help improve people's lives. So like I think that really drove me, like having a cultural aspect to things and actually building things that people used every day was really fun. Had to do my obligatory startup in Palo Alto, a great team at Wealthfront. We were at this old dry cleaner space um, in downtown Palo Alto. Like the energy there was fantastic. Great team. We were in the Bay Area for about 3.5 years, and my wife and I were just not fans of the Bay Area. We wanted more sun. We were promised beaches and sunshine all the time. That is not the Bay Area. So we went down to LA. Was lucky to have a few different opportunities pop up there, and ultimately worked for a little company that had a small office in Beverly Hills named Netflix, and you know had a great time there working on different roles on the brand side, the product creative side. Was there for about 7 years and change, and fantastic, fantastic company, fantastic culture. I was in Greece during COVID. We escaped to a Greek island, not terrible, and still
I
working from
remember
that.
that.
Yeah,
I remember
work.
your last call, you had it was like nighttime. You had a glass of wine, and we were celebrating you, and you're like, cheers, and it was like noon for us, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think I did the West Coast hours, which was not fun. It was fun during the summer because everybody hangs out till 2, 3 in the morning in Europe, but during the summer, but like you know, during the fall, it got a little wonky. But yeah, I mean, it was sad to leave. I just had this amazing opportunity working with another great team to really reinvent an old brand, and it was like Vista Print, going to Vista, and the mission, the team, everybody was fantastic there. Was there was no there's no UX team. It was primarily uh, marketing and creative driving experiences. So there was tons of engineers. So we built, I helped build the global UX team there, which was so rewarding, fantastic group of people. During that time, I was there for about a year and a half and realized that, that we went through a lot of work. My dad reached out and said, he was getting older and he wanted to go back to the homeland, to the motherland in Europe. And I had a conversation with my wife and I, and we said, wait, why? Like, why we should go? We should take him. And I did that, and it was the first time in 25 years where, it took more than a couple weeks off, other than having babies. So it was a really weird feeling not working, but like prioritizing the family was just felt great. And then, came back, and after a few months started itching. I needed to work again, and had some really, again, great opportunities. One with a large tech company that financially it would have been like incredible. But then also talking to this company Magic, with a small little developer app startup, and I realized that um, their values aligned with what I want to do. They loved creative, they loved design, they wanted to change the brand, they wanted to reinvent themselves. They also cared about user experience deeply. Um, and it was just new technology and a new challenge. And I chose to come to Magic, and I'm very glad I did. I think, again, financially, there's one aspect where I think I could have, you know, had a lot of money at this other place, but I think this was a better fit for me and my family, and for me personally to continue to grow. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting. We were talking before we hit record about the differences between organizations that really value design and creative versus organizations that don't. And if I heard you right, ultimately Magic was your choice because it's one of the values you have is creative, right? And like the value of it. What have you noticed the differences between companies that value creative? And I'm sure you worked at ones that didn't. Like, how was your experience different? What were the things that were different between design led versus not?
Yeah, I mean, totally. I think, you know this well too. It's sort of like, if you don't, especially at tech companies, you could be design led, you could be PM led, you could be engineering led. Either way, if people don't value the experience, you're going to get a different type of product. And maybe there are some companies that you don't need a great experience. Um, I could probably argue. I mean, that maybe that's why like healthcare software is not all that great when you kind of look at that aspect. But I think I know what drew me to Magic was, my initial conversation with the CEO, and we just talked about design, how much he cared about it. And and I think, talking to somebody like that versus talking to I've talked to other companies where like, oh yeah, we just need somebody to manage the team. And, uh, how do we make sure the designers work faster and better, and things like that? And they're not prioritizing the experience. They see it as a supporting role, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I have maybe I have an allergic reaction to being a supporting, like, an internal agency, especially inside of a brand. Like, if you're an agency, you get paid for your time and your abilities, and you're supporting the initiatives of the company. When you're in house, I think the role of creatives and design should expand outside of decoration. Like, how do you make sure the experience is great, the brand is great? Like, I've had been really lucky here, where as I've grown in my career, but also at Magic, it's like my impact is not just in design. Like, we just went through a values exercise here where I led you know, the team on new company values. Like that is really important because designers and creators are naturally empathetic. We care. We want people to be motivated. We want to make sure that like, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting, but I feel that we're kind of leaning more towards drawn to companies and that have strong cultures and care about things like quality, like craftsmanship, like design, like brand, all those things. Like the cliche Apple, you know, they're the world's like most valuable company. I mean, they lead by design. Airbnb is fantastic. Like they
Hmm.
care about the experience immensely. I've seen like Brian's videos. There was one um, from the Figma concert convention conference last year, which was fantastic on how they planned their roadmap and their experiences and centered around uh, 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 the user and the customer.
Yeah, it's crazy how that experience is so much different. And you mentioned, right, like healthcare, someone needs to do something, but like some people think, let's take lemonade for example, right? Because everybody think, oh, they're so disruptive in the insurance space, and who likes insurance? Nobody likes insurance. But like, I didn't think of it as disruptive what Lemonade was doing. No offense to anyone at Lemonade. I just think they led with design. That's
Totally.
it. Like, how do we make something that is terrible to have to do easy for someone? Oh, let's just may walk them through it and make it super easy, clean, simple. And they grew because of that. They decided, hey,
Right.
everyone else isn't going to be design led. We're going to be product led. Let's be design led. And they turned in like they grew and they're doing well. At least at last I checked. Um, so knowing all that, knowing what you look for, how would you inform folks or advise folks to what to look for? How do they know the difference between a design led organization or maybe a PM led or even like engineering led?
I mean, there are values to everything. Like I think Wealthfront, for instance, there was 30 engineers, and I was the sole design person. Netflix, when we were at Netflix, I could say it's more product management. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think it matters who's driving as long as they care. Like again, going back to Magic here, the three co-founders are engineers. They care immensely about design. Like maybe they can't, do it themselves, but they care about the experience, which is, design is one part of. Um, so I think it's like it really boils down to what you value and what you want to do. I think I had the luxury of going through like what is valuable and what is important to me. And what's important to me is to work on challenging, cool things with fun, creative people. And I think that's very easy. So like I just gravitate towards those people. And like I said, I think, for people coming up, really, what do they want to work on? And, like design led, I don't know, we could talk about this forever probably,
Yeah.
but these are also businesses too. So like maybe there's a business that doesn't need to be design led that I could probably argue that, Magic is not design led, but we care about the experience so much where we prioritize things that make the experience and the brand better. I don't know
Yeah,
if that
that's a
makes
that's a great distinction. Yeah, that totally right. It doesn't An organization doesn't need to be necessarily design led, but has to value the craft,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And knowing that it's not like there's people have this perspective, right? That either content is king or product is king or whatever, right? Yeah, but if that product is the best product in the world, but it sucks to have to access it or it sucks to use it,
Right.
right? And then what do you have? You have a good product that nobody uses, right?
Well, that's where there's a thing Intuit. So Intuit is they have TurboTax and QuickBooks, and they bought, Mint. Like you have to pay your taxes. You have to do your books for your business. I think what they do is they also choose to make sure that the experience is positive. And I think in early days maybe they didn't prioritize it as much, but they do really care about like the experience factor. And again, it's not just design teams, it's really everybody focused to make sure it's a positive thing as you go forward, as you use their product.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Like we both had to battle this at Netflix and maybe even other places where like there's core metrics, right? So Netflix was streaming and retention, right? But then there was the what people call fuzzy metrics that we always had to prove, like what is delight, right? How do we prove delight? How do we prove like this experience is so much better than something
Right.
that has similar metrics? So I'd love to hear one, how if you encounter that at Magic and how you kind of work your team and talk your team through those things. Um, and then two, also like how you innovate and motivate and inspire your team there.
My eye is twitching because I think we don't. Yeah, it just brings up memories of like great memories and great debates of what we had at Netflix, where the balance of what's right for the customer to get them to a show they want versus the creative they see. Like we had conversations around quality. A lot of it's subjective, but then we can measure like things. So yeah, I don't know. We can probably talk about the Netflix stuff forever. Um, Wonderful. They do a wonderful job, and I think we had a great time doing that, having those debates. I think in Magic it's a little different, right? Because also we're doing like we're tech infrastructure. I think some of our experiences are maybe white labeled or under the hood.
Mm,
You know, brand is, we're small startup growing. Like even this cool background, we one of the designers made, like usually you wouldn't prioritize things like this, like the delight factor. And I think it comes down to, well, what do you care about? And I think like I'm thankful that the company cares about all these details and all these things. So when we do create an experience that's awesome or create a piece of creative, they value it. So when it comes to like the debates, it's funny. There is some subjectivity for sure. When it comes to UX, as a small company, you know, a lot of people have opinions. Oh, we should do this, we should do that. What I've instilled when it comes to especially the user experience is like, well, let's talk to people, right? So let's use tools, let's focus groups, usertesting.com, any other site or service where we actually talk to people to get insights other than like trying to debate internally. Um, I, that doesn't help anyone. And I think my kryptonite is like fighting over words for like headlines and marketing copy and things like that. Like, oh my God, kill me. Like, just pick one, or we can just test it, or we can bring it to users. I think at the end of the day, um, whatever, like what resonate if we can find something that resonates with the end user or the customer and also feels good from a brand perspective, and like we feel authentic about it, like we feel good about it, that's kind of the dream, right? So it's got to work and it's also got to be great creatively.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can always test things. I have a love-hate relationship with testing too, and I think like testing is good for certain things, but also it's if you're lazy, you'll say, "Oh, just test it."
Well, I can tell you, like, I remember a fun story that people hated me for a long time at Netflix, the marketing team, because I was in LA by myself as like the kind of lone product person once, and then for a minute. And I remember doing this, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on artwork and creating marketing campaigns. And I remember there was a show, was it a Bloodline, right? Where everybody went down to Key West and did this sexy photo shoot and it was amazing. And then, as we were testing the artwork on the service, I worked with a designer and I just said, what, can you just do me a favor? Just get a stock shot of water, put text that looks like blood in the water that says Bloodline. And I was like, creatively, like, ugh, like, man, but you know what? Like, that image outperformed. I mean, it wasn't terrible. It was
Yeah.
good. It wasn't like a marketing photo shoot piece of key art, but that image that cost $200 in an hour of a designer's time outperformed, the $200,000 marketing shoot plus the agency fees to create that piece of artwork. And I think, we were taught to be provocative, right? Like how because we need to find those edges of like, we pushed hard, and I know this too, of like
Hmm.
things that were questionable, not creatively, but like things that people wouldn't normally do in the artwork, um, to drive engagement. And we didn't measure just it wasn't just clickbait, right? It's like, what you clicked on and the amount of time that you watched, it was clear that you were watching the show, meaning like we had metrics that identified not just clicks but also viewing behavior, and it was a fun kind of game to realize like what can help people get into a show. Sometimes it's not the beautiful artwork that you
Hmm.
think mind you need to do. Um, it's something that just conveys the theme or the idea pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because one of the things I help people do is define what good looks like for them, and and subjective and like beauty
Nice.
or polish is just one aspect of it. There's
That's
like
true.
authenticity, there's intentionality, there's like those kinds of things that Bloodline was a very it was I wouldn't say it was super polished. It was like pretty raw when you watched it, right? It's like raw, it's always dark and grainy and stuff like that. So like that represented the title. I think the winner was the boat on fire, and I think that was a still too, right?
But yeah, yep.
Right.
There was a
So like
there was a proponent fight, and then we got to the point where every one of them could win,
yeah, right.
right? Where it's like if you watch it, you see the boat on fire, or I would see the text, and Netflix was so great about like personalizing the experience and the images to what we thought or the algos thought you would respond to.
Yeah. Um, I want to get to the second part because I think this is interesting for people too. Is you have a smaller team, you've had various size teams, you've had teams of one, teams of 100. Um, what do you do to continually get to bring their best work to like inspire, motivate, connect to the mission?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's been the fun part the past 2 years, especially with a small team. I think what actually literally yesterday I was talking to the team, and we have like a brand designer who came on board, and another marketing kind of designer, and I conveyed to them that we have the ability to do whatever we want here. There's no layers, there's no clients. Like, this is our brand, we can make it whatever we want. You don't get those. It's rare to have that, to have the ability to, like, oh, you want to go do something, great, go do it. We have a value here, which is called bias towards action, which is like, oh, great, you want to see it, go do it, don't wait. And also, people love the great creativity and the design that the team puts together. So we do get the freedom to do what we want, which is very rare, right? So if you're, especially if you're working at big companies or you're an agency working a client with clients, sometimes you don't get that freedom. Here we do get that freedom. So I think I'm trying to motivate folks to get inspired. One, to get inspired to do what they want, like bring the creativity, bring a little bit of the personal essence into this stuff as well, and and also just like as a coach and a manager, like kind of like carving out the space so they have time to explore. The challenge of being at a startup is, you want to move fast, you want to try new things quickly. Sometimes you need some breathing room to let designs and creativity kind of come out. So how do we spend a little bit more time in developing ideas versus like trying to knock everything out in different sprints?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I mean, autonomy is people always like I always want it, but it's rare to find true autonomy. Because
Yeah.
like a lot of people during the interview, they'll say, "Oh yeah, this is a very autonomous environment," and the moment you get there, oh, like this is what you need to work on, and this is kind of what
Right.
it needs to
That's,
look like. Here's the design spec for you. um,
And I think it's funny, like I think even with some people they're trained that way too. It's sort of like, or a new designer who joins says, well, maybe we should have a ticketing system where people submit tickets to requests. And it's funny, like I just jerked. I was like,
oh
oh, I don't, yeah, exactly. I don't
yeah,
want that. Like, I want you to be a part of that strategy of what we need to do and shape it. And then we can design the creative with it, not like a ticketing agency or an agency where, or I don't even like a Jira request of like creative like that or design. That makes me cringe. Again,
yeah.
that's probably personally
I
of
mean,
you.
just this the sound of that. Can you if you go to someone that's creative and they say, "Can you submit a Jira request?" I'm uh, like, how can you communicate a creative intent and all of the context in a Jira request? It's so yeah. And to your point, like having a seat at the table is probably the better way to get the best out of your creative team, right? Is like understand from soup to nuts like what are we trying to accomplish, who are we trying, who's our audience, like what's the most important thing, what is just noise, right?
Yep.
um and sometimes when you're brought in at the 11th hour you're given a spec, you're given all this stuff, and you're like, well, I don't even know why I'm doing this. I can do this, but I don't know why. So you're probably not going to get my best work. But unfortunately, that's how some organizations work. I want to get back to you. So back to you, what would you say is your biggest or maybe the most difficult moment or the hardest thing in your creative journey so far?
That's a good question, man. I think, I think a lot of people have this. I've talked to, the hustle and the grind when you're younger, like it's fake news. I mean, for me, like I think you're trained to work really hard. At least I did. New York agency, late 90s, early 2000s. Like it's a hustle. It's you're working towards getting to the next level type of thing. And I think once it's funny at Netflix there was I remember we used to go to reorgs every 6 months, and I had a team there which you're familiar with, like half in LA, half in the Bay Area, and I was flying up every week, and then I realized like we are going through a reorg, and then my wife was pregnant at the time. Like, do I want to be doing this? And is it the right for the thing for the business? So I think kind of reshaping, taking ego out of it. And I think the best lesson I learned was if you're doing right by the business and by your values, you're pretty far ahead. And I realized with that team, I kind of gave up that team during the reorg because one, it was the right thing to do for the business. It made total sense. And for me personally, it made sense to, not be traveling so much. Um, and I went to an IC role, an individual contributor role, which I think some people would think about it and be like, "Wow, you were a manager, you're building teams for so long, and now you're just an independent contributor." Like, no, that's it's it's not about the title; it's about the impact that you can make. And I know we've seen a lot of these things. Like some people have the path of like being a coach, manager. Some are IC. They're both leaders. Like we know individual contributors that are definitely leaders and mentors, and as seen as they're growing in their career. I think the hardest thing for me was now it's like liberating. It's like not worrying about title, not worrying about like ladders and shit like that, but really focusing on the work and the people and really what makes you happy.
Yeah, 100%. I I try it's interesting because like I 100% agree with you. But it's funny because whenever I would bring that up to people, the number one comeback is
But
coming from someone who has one, right? So it's like I was like, oh, I don't titles don't matter, and they're like,
no,
oh, but you have one. I'm like, well, I didn't want this title. Like that's what
yeah,
one thing people don't realize is like people like you and me, we don't want titles. We want to be impactful,
yeah,
right? And that's what I loved about Netflix is like titles didn't matter. It was like, what's your impact? Whenever anyone would join my team, and I'm sure you did too, like, well, what does success look like? Or like, how do I move up? Impact. That's it.
yeah.
If you can
That's
have
it.
impact on the business, material impact on the business, you'll be successful here in one
I
way
think
or another.
you're totally spot on. And like, again, more Apple cliche examples. There was a quote, or a little clip from Steve Jobs years ago, which kind of resonated with me because I always like I went back, I would be a manager or a leader, then going back being manager, I see kind of going back and forth. And it's in the clip he mentions that like he had consultants and there were like layers of management, and the best managers are the ones who don't want to be managers, but they're kind of forced into it. And I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, shit, I don't know if I want to manage like 100+ person team. Like, but I knew I could do it because there are some creatives and designers that like would not do it. Um, I don't know. I like for me, like this stage of I love the work beyond anything. I realize though there are way better people doing the work than I'm, way better creators, way better UX designers, like brand designers, like shit, they're really good. And
Mm-hmm.
really, I get my energy these days in terms of like giving them the space, giving them the feedback, and like letting them do their thing and helping them shape the work. That's the most exciting thing. Even like this little background, like I can't create this stuff, but he Alex and his little iPad just knocked this out, and it's just like it's beautiful. So um, I don't know. I like giving the space to the designers and the creative, and I think again working at a leadership level to convey the importance of design and UX and brand and how it can impact the business as well has been kind of like my sweet spot recently.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like similar. Like it's gonna sound cheesy when I'm saying this, but early in the career, right, you create things and experiences, right? Now I'm in the point in my career where I help people create their future. So whatever that looks like for
Yeah,
them, right? So if a designer is up and coming or whatever, coaching them and helping them really go beyond their potential, right? And I started realizing that towards the end of my corporate career, and that's why I made this shift because I was like, well, I'm leaning more into coaching and developing people than I am like making things. I haven't made something in a while. um,
well, I mean, you are making things. It's just a different. I see it as
yeah,
like
it's a different way, right? Yeah.
different way of creating things. Like, I think one of the most things, like I mentioned, one of the proudest things that I've done recently is like helping create the company values and building the culture at Magic here. That's not specifically design related, but it is like building and making something tangible and creative that other people can ingest and use. So no, I think it's just a different facet of the same thing.
Yeah, it's just a different creating different things now
Totally.
instead of creating like physical
Right.
things, like we're creating environments and cultures and things. That's great. I know we're coming up at time. There's two questions I want to ask. One was, what's one piece of advice you'd give for someone who's coming up? And I think there's a lot of nuggets that you dropped already, but if there's one piece of advice, and then maybe a book or a leader, you can either one, that was impactful in your journey.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think the advice goes back to kind of what I mentioned about like, trying to like grow in that ladder. I think, the more that you can identify your values and what's important for you, to me, looking back, the most important things have been the process, making things, not necessarily the output, but like making things with great people and continuing to kind of change it. So I would say, like, I know it's easier said than done, and you bring up a good point, which is like, yeah, we've had the careers to kind of do that. Um, but at the end of the day, I think the work is the most important thing, and trying not to get caught up. Especially, this is a great time. Like, you don't have to be a manager to make more money. Like that shit's already gone. At least in like tech, we see this. There are individual contributors, let's say, that are very successful. I remember at Netflix, there were ICs that actually got paid way more than directors in
Mm-hmm.
the company. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because of their impact and their skill. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue to grow, where it's like you don't have to be a certain kind of level, or I'm sorry, like a manager or something, to make more money and be more successful. You could be a leader by doing great work. Um, so it's like
Yeah.
focusing on work. And in terms of like, for me, when I was at college, I went to art school studying design in the city, in New York City. Uh, I was in a work study program, and I had an opportunity to work with, oh, agencies, or like being an intern at these bigger agencies. But I chose to work with an artist that cleaning his brushes. I was an artist assistant for a while, and he was a Japanese painter, a remarkable painter in downtown Manhattan, and also a carpenter. And I learned way more from him than I could learn at a design shop. So, his name was Kiko Saito. He has since passed, but like I learned not only art and design, but that work ethic was just as important. So he treated art like a job, and his kind of theory, which still resonates with me, it's not about getting hot and like being a rock star artist or whatever. It's just continuing to grow and on your path and on that journey. So that was really impactful in terms of a mentor, and that kind of leads maybe into the book. I think I don't there's great books out there and about business and leadership. I think I've always been a fan of The Alchemist. I mean, always. I mean, I've been reading it. It only came to me a few years ago, but I read that often. And The Alchemist, it emphasizes like the importance of following your dream and listening to your heart. You know, it's the if you put if you pursue your goals with, and your values with faith and determination, like the universe will conspire to help you achieve your goals. And I think, it does convey that the journey is as important as the destination. Again, sounds cheesy. But like, is that can be really transformative and like spiritually enriching. So it's all about the process. That's
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know you had a mentor, like you were an art assistant. That's something. I'm learning something. I thought I knew you, and I'm learning new stuff about you. Dude, that's fantastic. I may do that now.
uh, I'm trying to go back. Trying to go back. I want to art assistant and going back to a deli. It's funny how the world kind of, it brings back to, to what you grew up doing in your core. I think yeah, the creative stuff. You mentioned, just last thing, we're not making things, but I think there is an aspect to like making things. I think that's the beauty of having kids too. Like, you can sit there with glue and crayons and just like be present with them and create. And it
Mhm.
kind of like brings you back to like why you're in this in the beginning. It's like making something and the process, seeing that with, through a child's eye too. And kind of you get out of your workspace and you just focus on being present in the craft and making things. That's kind of where the joy is.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%. Like with my kids, I love like the art and making. And then there's something about like what you said about going back is remembering the simple joys out of why
Absolutely.
we chose to be creatives in the first place, right? Whether it's cleaning brushes and just watching someone perfect their craft or at least try, right? And
Yeah, man.
there's no perfection, there's no idea of perfection, but chasing it nonetheless, right? And getting better over time. Um, cool. Well, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for people to get to you? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram? How can people reach
Yeah,
out to you?
I kind of did a social suicide a few years ago with a lot of things. I think LinkedIn, yeah. Yep. I'm always down to connect with like, like-minded creatives and anybody who yeah, wants to talk about this or connect or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll have your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So I appreciate you taking the time, Steve, out of your busy schedule. And it was good catching up for sure.
Good catching up with you, man. Appreciate you, and I'm excited for what you're doing and helping folks for sure.
Yeah, right on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for checking out Creative Leadership with Heart. Just make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. We have a lot more content coming out. So if you do subscribe, you'll get notified when we have new episodes. All right, take it easy. See you in the next one.